I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Wednesday, August 31st, last day of August 2022. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have you along as well. And today we generally talk about wealth building, homeownership, generational wealth. That's a phrase that we hear a lot now. I think it's a good phrase to be hearing. I think it's wonderful that the concept, the notion, the wording, generational wealth is emerging, bubbling up throughout the community on social spaces, in social media, in family conversations. And I think that the more we think about it and talk about it, become familiar with it, explore the meaning of it, and then examine ourselves and our pathways, our priorities, our activities in light of an adoption of the idea of our role to create generational wealth, the better off we become. I think the language that's happening abroad in the community is allowing the emergence of a consensus, a re-examination of who we are to each other in a way that is not competitive but cooperative, in a way that is not dismissive but validating, encouraging. And I think that we are recovering, rediscovering maybe that spirit that led us out of the period of formal legal slavery, where these people dispossessed, not regarded as human beings, struck out many of them across the country, and creating communities and successful communities, but guided by a desire to know and to live in freedom and to live in dignity and with respect to each other in a way that their indwelling spirit might have suggested or advised that this is part of a continuum. The progress and the movement of our people, even though painful, they set out creating communities and intentional in creating towns, building economic systems that sustained them both individually and as families. And what I think I'm seeing and feeling and hearing right now is the re-emergence of that idea, the reconnecting to that spirit abroad in our community. People are looking at where we've come from, looking at the statistics that show consistent and unmistakable institutional processes that continue to marginalize and disadvantage and take from us. We're seeing that for what it is, because we've been told one thing. We've been told that the reason we have not succeeded is because of our deficiencies, defects in our character or our vision. But we now know that the teller had another agenda, and the agenda was the continued theft of our labor, our skill, our opportunity to live freely and fully, and to be co-equal partners in the creation of this society. That notwithstanding, people, we have done marvelously as a culture, as a community, as a race. And I don't use the word race often, but in this case I will. I think, as I say that of the words of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, up you mighty race, you can become what you will. And I think in that sense, there is a need for us to acknowledge what we have done, where we have come from, and our capacity, our intent, the inevitability of our continued pursuit of freedom. And freedom is what we define by what we do every day. Freedom and opportunity, and that has to be and can be a generational experience. Well, listen, let's open the conversation up. We want you to know that we have some tickets to give away for the Minnesota State Fair. we're glad to make those available to you. All you have to do is send an email to me, send it to Al at Insight News, and to the degree that I have them still, I'm going to get them out to you and arrange for you to pick them up somewhere in the community. I want you to enjoy State Fair. Let me begin by bringing in my co-host and partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray. Brenda, how you doing? How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to see you.
Always when you ask me, I want to say very blessed to be on this side of the dirt.
There we go. That's the name of the game. Well, for our guests coming up, I want them to know that Brenda and I go back a ways. We're both 70. I'll be 75 in a couple of weeks. Brenda's 75 already, but we met each other as 5-year-olds. We were in kindergarten together in Kansas
surreal.
City.
It's so surreal. 70 years.
It's a beautiful thing, you know, and the beauty of it is that we have the advantage, Brenda, of looking at and talking about the world that we are in right now, reflecting on what we thought, what our dreams were, what our parents did, and what they gave us and told us, and how they encouraged us and guided us. And we've made our way through life. You, as a phenomenal, exceptional teacher, educator, author, and now journalist, working with me, and me in my field as a communicator. I call myself a witness, a scribe. And that's been my work, is to tell the story, to tell it the way I see it, and to operate with a certain confidence, knowledge that my perception is a gift, and I treat it that way. So it's great.
Can I tell you this real quick, though?
Go ahead.
I don't know if you know the info. I told Sean Lewis about it. We were emailing at 5 or 6 this morning, and I said, my students pull out the dictionary when my boss starts talking because they haven't figured out how to keep the Facebook on, but look up these words. And so they begin to write them down. You don't know the influence that you're having on young people. And I have one young man, Nigel, that was a West Point graduate, and he's now reading Arma. I sent him the quote, and I can't find my quote right now. But anyway, he started looking it up, and he said, you let Mr. McFarlane know that I'm reading The Healers.
Oh, boy. Well, that's a great book.
But that's great, though, Al.
Well, here's how this works, too, Brenda. Because I read the works of Ikwe Arma, again, for my guests that are coming on in a minute, Ikwe Arma is a Ghanaian writer, journalist of note, world class. He's about 78, 80s now. But he wrote a book. His famous book is called The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. He has more books. I've got most of them here. One called The Eloquence of the Scribes, one called The Healers, one called Remembering the Dismembered Continent, and there are others. So I'm reading everything I can get my hands on. And what is consistent in Ikwe Arma for me is the idea that we as African people have to find an African and demonstrate and live in and propagate an Africana way of knowing. Those words are intentional, Africana way of knowing. And I get those from our couple of heroes of mine, Dr. Karen Hunter and Dr. Greg Carr, who have created a social media juggernaut. It's not the right word, but it's a good one. That is called Narrative. Narrative is the word narrative with a K, just like knowledge with a K. And alongside Narrative, I'm wearing the property, the brand now, a project called Nubia. Both of them, I tell people, look it up, check it out, join, be amazed by it. And what they're asking people to do is, as we build a reality for our people, everybody can bring their own brick. We can come up with a process of collaboration that honors and validates the understanding, the knowledge, the capability, the skills that each of us brings, and bring them in a way that they can amplify each other in the creation of something that none of us could do alone. So that's happening as we speak. All of that characterizes the mission at hand that is being described in his books by Ike Arma, the healers, the eloquence of the scribes, and more. In all these stories, the subcurrent, the theme is our people finding our way home. And home is to a place of knowledge, a way of knowing that predated kings and queens, that predated our experience with the Europeans, with colonizers, that predated our experience with the patriarchy. There was a system, he suggests, that allowed us to approach each other with a intentionality about the acquisition of knowledge, about the documentation of what we knew and what we did in a systematic way, and about the ability to share that learning, that knowledge with each other, community by community and around the world. So the question is, with the advent of the power of connectivity through social media, are we now in a position to reestablish a way of knowing, a way of being with each other that is not competitive, that is cooperative, and that does not depend on one ruling over the other or the few ruling over the many, but rather is organized in a way that protects all of the people and grows all of the people all of the time. He said it's like organizing for the drinking of milk of a child. Is part of what you do in to grow your human beingness. So with that, and I want to just show one more thing. I'm going to pull up on my screen here as the consequence, and the language question you mentioned, Brenda, or statement you made is important to me. As a consequence of reading these, what Insight has done is relaunched a section that we call Afro Descendientes.
Oh, that was powerful.
And I just want to show it if I can pull up the screen here. What do I do? I'll share. Let me get this real quick, and then I'll bring my guest in.
What a great double page.
Share. Isn't that nice? I'm going to share a screen, and I mean, some people are going to say, "What are you doing that for?" And I have to just say, because I can, first of all.
That's the best answer.
But secondly, it's necessary. So what we've done with Afro Descendientes, I started this some years back, reflecting my own bicultural reality. My father, is Jamaican, Cuban-born Jamaican. I grew up hearing Spanish in the house, not that we spoke it, but when my dad got mad and wanted to swear, the swearing was in Spanish. And so I have a feeling for the passion of the language. And that led me to take Spanish in school, Brenda, at Central Junior High School. And once I started, it never stopped. So I have maintained and continued to develop
and that's a blessing
in Spanish. And so we started off doing Afro-Descendientes in Spanish and in English. The idea that there are many, many African people, Black people, who speak Spanish, not English, probably as many in South America and the Caribbean as there are here. Well, when you add to that the fact that Portugal has 100 million people, over 50% of them identify themselves as Black. Really, the Black world in the New World is centered not in North America, as we've been taught to believe, but in the Caribbean and in South America. How do we acknowledge that? So we've created a way to talk about who we are in the diaspora. And this section called Afro-Descendientes now is being presented in Spanish, in English, in French, in Somali, and in Portuguese for the Brazilians. We're asking, we might add Swahili next week for the next iteration. So to your comment, Brenda, when we don't know what student is going to look at this, read the English part, and make the association, really all these languages belong to me. I can learn all of these. I can speak all of these. And that is the intent, to encourage our people to think broadly, expansively about our position and our possession of the planet. And
Al, do you remember when one of our guests said, and I forgot who it was, that went to Africa and ran into a group of kids and they were speaking 5 different languages?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And most children in Africa speak multiple languages. And so that's something that we do. Well, let me go ahead and bring in my guest. Doc, first of all, let me get my list back up. Let me close this out. And Hold on here 1 second. So I'm pleased to have coming into the program Chad Dipman, who is the land development director for a project that is going to be here in North Minneapolis, Harrison Townhomes. And it's associated with, I'm hoping we'll be joined by Chris Coleman as well. Chris Coleman is president and CEO of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. Also, let's bring them in now, two realtors who are here. They've been working, I think, with our friends over at Build Wealth Minnesota, Mary Spears and Lauren Spears of Marles. If I'm saying it wrong, you can correct me. Realty. Welcome, guys. Thank you all for being here. And it's good to see you. There's Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman, thank you for being here. Listen, it was good to see you early this week when you and your team had hosted the Secretary of HUD, Marcia L. Fudge, and talked about the program for keeping older people in their homes. But that was just the beginning, because there's a lot that you all are doing. Let me just say thank you for, number one, doing what you're doing, what you've done in your career, acknowledging to our audiences here that Chris Coleman is the former mayor of St. Paul and is part of a family legacy that has been an asset to Minnesota and our community, our country, I believe. Chris, good to see you.
Well,
talk about what you're doing now as the leader of Habitat for Humanity and how these two projects tie into that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Al. It's great to be on your show again. It's been a while, and good to see you. And Brenda, thank you so much. I've been at Twin Cities Habitat now for just a little over 4 years as its president and CEO. And in that time, we have really gone through a lot of conversations and a lot of soul searching about what our role is in creating equity in housing in the Twin Cities community. We know that we have one of the largest disparities in rates of home ownership between white households and black households of any place in the entire country. And that wasn't an accident. That was because of restrictive covenants, of redlining, building freeways through the Rondo neighborhood and other black-owned homes. So we have to be as intentional about solving the problem that we created as we weren't creating it in the first place. And that's why our new strategic plan that we adopted last December is very specifically targeted towards not only equity and home ownership in the Twin Cities, but very focused in on foundational black families, foundational black households, to make sure that they have the same opportunity to buy a home that I had, that my parents had. My dad, came back from the war and bought a house on the GI Bill. My ma, who grew up in the Rondo neighborhood, was able to reap the benefits of the fact that they owned homes. And I was able to reap the benefits of that because when I went to buy a home, I went to the First National Bank of Mom for down payment assistance. And she was able to help me because she had built up equity over the years. So we're focused in on that. We're working on projects like the Harrison Townhomes project in North Minneapolis. That will be 17 beautiful units of housing that families will own. And one of the things we're focused in on is making sure that as values rise in North Minneapolis and the near South Side and across the Twin Cities, that the people that have been part of those communities for years actually reap the benefit of those increases in values. And we do that through home ownership.
So you're dealing with the question of regentrification. You're not saying it, but I'm saying it. What do we do about that? On the one hand, you want a mixed income community because you want the wealth added to the community. But the question is, can that be done without displacement of the existing residents? And in the past, it has not been. The system has been a system that rooted out black wealth and black people from desirable communities. How do you address that?
Well, I think by the kind of investment that we're making, not just in the Harrison Townhomes project, but that is certainly one of the key examples of that. Because when you think about those 17 families that will occupy those townhomes in the north side, they will be able to build the wealth that is going to be generated and I think we're already starting to see some of that. If you go up to the far north in Minneapolis, you're starting to see some changes, but we have to be intentional about it. When we built the light rail line years ago along the Central Corridor, there were years of conversation about how do we make sure that we're not pushing people out of the neighborhood that they had invested in for years. So whether you were an owner on University Avenue or a homeowner in the Frogtown or some of the university neighborhoods, we said, what are the programs, what are the resources we can bring to the table? One of the things that we're doing is we're creating what's called a special purpose credit program that will provide additional resources for those families that trace their roots to their descendants of enslaved Africans that have called the Twin Cities home for generations, and making sure that whether it's additional down payment assistance, credit repair programs, whatever it might be, that we provide the additional boost that it will be necessary for them to actually be able to buy a home.
Wow.
So that's a nod towards reparations. It's not the answer, but it's a step in that direction. Are you seeing it that way, Chris?
Well, it certainly is a nod towards undoing the damage that we have created through generations and centuries of racist housing policy in this country. The Twin Cities are not unique. The fact of the matter is, if you look at a freeway and it looks like a snake, that means it went through a white neighborhood. If it's a straight line, it probably went through a BIPOC community. And so the fact of the matter is, we have to be intentional about this. So you can certainly look at it as reparations. I like to think of it as kind of making amends for the fact that the GI Bill wasn't available for African American soldiers coming back after they served their country and fought overseas. Because of redlining, because of restrictive covenants, banks wouldn't lend to African American veterans. And so those generations of wealth that were created as a result of home ownership have been lost to the African American community. And if you talk with someone like Marvin Anderson, who's trying to help rebuild the Rondo community and bridge the freeway over the Rondo neighborhood, he'll tell you that it wasn't just the fact that they lost homes when we built the freeway through the Rondo neighborhood. We lost hope. The community lost hope and lost a sense of ownership and belonging, in a sense that they can build the wealth that would allow them to not only help their children buy homes or their grandchildren buy homes, invest in businesses, send their kids to college. All of those things, when those dollars and the equity was lost, those opportunities were lost as well.
Let me bring Chad in. Chad, give us a background on the Harrison community. Talk about what Harrison used to be, what it is now, and what your vision is, what this project does to move the ball in a direction that, is reflective of a different intent.
Sure. Thanks, Al. I'll do my best, but I just want to make it clear I'm not a resident of Harrison. I never had been, so I shouldn't speak for its entirety. But certainly right now, it's a neighborhood that is facing a lot of redevelopment pressure and gentrification as kind of downtown expands out, and the attractiveness of what has been either vacant parcels or marginally utilized old industrial buildings becomes attractive for redevelopment. And while a new building is better than a vacant piece of property, the resultant kind of externalities of that can have a negative impact on communities. So when Wellington management decided to undertake some redevelopment of the Bassett Creek Valley area, they worked with the Harrison Neighborhood Organization on that vision, and the Bassett Creek Redevelopment Committee. And both of those entities identified a need for the creation of homeownership, especially homeownership that would remain affordable as this redevelopment occurred around it. So they partnered with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust to create a project that would be permanently affordable homeownership. Wellington and City of Lakes attempted to tackle that themselves, but realized without experience in townhome development that they were a little bit shorthanded. So they invited us into the project in about 2018. And so with that kind of 3-member partnership, which has since kind of coalesced into just Habitat and City of Lakes, we were able to generate a tremendous amount of excitement amongst our public funders and private funders for this concept of 17 units of permanently affordable homeownership. So the project has been, we've been entirely through the pre-development process. We're just putting the finishing touches on some plan clarifications and bidding, and are ready to let those subcontracts and hopefully get in the ground this fall. But we just have had tremendous support from the neighborhood organization in our funding applications to the city, county, state, even the federal government directly through the Treasury Department. We still have some holes to fill in our budget, but we're committed to getting that project going, and know that that continued momentum will bring about even more partnerships.
I'm going to ask you to explain what permanently affordable means. I have had a guest on from the Land Trust, and the model they've described, I think, is interesting, fascinating, and useful. I think that probably applies here. But before I do, let me bring our entrepreneurs into the conversation. Mary Spears and Larry Spears are here. They own, is it Marles or Marles Realty?
We call it Marles Realty.
Marles. Okay. All right. Tell me about the name, first of all. Good afternoon. Welcome. And glad to have you here. Tell me about the name Marles.
Interesting. My wife, Mary A, is Mary A. Riley. So that's Mar, M-A-R. Orange E. Spears is Les, L-E-S.
There we go. Real plain, real simple.
Great.
Simple. Listen, talk about your business, and one of the things that you're working with us on is the David McGee and the Build Wealth Minnesota initiative. How do we get our people back into homeownership or into homeownership? And how does this conversation fit into your business strategy? What kind of general awareness ought we be trying to create about the value of owning a home? And how can people like you both advance and serve and profit from creating homeownership, creating wealth in our community?
Well, thank you so much for having us. Yeah, and it's been such a delight just working with David on this program, 9,000 Equities. I love his initiative, and I love his goals, and I love the desire that he has in terms of wanting to bridge that gap in white home ownership and Black home ownership. I've been in the business for 22 years now, and to say the least, it's been quite challenging, to put people of color in homes. It's been a challenge to get them approved, and in a lot of ways keep them motivated, to let them know that there is something for them, and that they are worthy of owning a home. I believe so many of them have been blocked out, that they don't believe that it's possible, So just to hear these gentlemen talk about the things they're doing in the community, like Harrison. I'm born and raised in Minnesota, so I've seen, many things happen in North Minneapolis. I mean, I grew up in North Minneapolis when I believe the majority of North Minneapolis was a Jewish neighborhood.
Where did you grow up? What neighborhood? Where'd you start off at?
I grew up on right on 14th and DuPont, right off of Plymouth Avenue.
Sure.
And so everything that was probably west of Humboldt. I remember when Plymouth was full of dime stores and bakeries and delicatessens and all that, and meat markets. And I remember when Broadway had theaters up and down and popcorn stands. I remember all that. And so I remember Harrison, the one that they just spoke. I remember that community. That was what we call the projects back in those days, and to see that now that they're doing improvements in there, to put families in there to become home owners, not people in a pigeonhole into something called the projects, which was, for low-income families who couldn't quite make it, but to see that they're doing things like that now in North Minneapolis to bring it back. I just hate the way that they stigmatize North Minneapolis. It has so much to offer. In real estate, we say location, location, location. North Minneapolis should be booming, in terms of the value. I mean, you're close to downtown, you're close to the Vikings, you're close to the Twin Stadium, you're close to the Target Center. So to hear about Habitat Humanity and the things that they want to do in those communities really does excite me. I'm so excited,
Let,
even
let
more.
me let me throw a picture out. Just popped in my head, and you can react to it. Chris, you can react to it too. But as you were describing the benefit, the beauty, the potential of North Minneapolis and how it's been allowed to atrophy, uh, my mind goes to Haiti. When Haiti overthrew the French, overthrew white rule,
Mhm.
the reaction of the white power of the world is that you will pay forever.
Yeah.
And the Haiti that they once called the breadbasket, and the pearl and the source of all French wealth, uh, became then a hellhole. Our former president had nasty words for black owned countries, and it was our policy that made these communities, countries, neighborhoods dysfunctional, uh, disinvested, and ignored. What do you think about that?
Well, they have perfected ways to strip wealth out of communities and countries, and Haiti's an example of that. And North Minneapolis is an example of that.
Yes.
And when you think about the wealth that was taken away from families when we built Rondo, or the freeway through the Rondo neighborhood, what did Roy Wilkins describe Rondo as? A riot of warm colors and sounds, and just the amazing community that was built there. A mixed race community, but the center of the African American community in St. Paul, and we stripped wealth out of there, paying pennies on the dollar, taking down businesses, taking down residents, and sending people off to places that they were not connected to, that they didn't have that community, and we've never been able to recreate that. And so I think part of what we have to understand as we try to undo the damage that was done through wealth stripping and all the practices that have gone into making sure that I think often of the eulogy for George Floyd that Reverend Sharpton gave. Just let us breathe. Take your knee off our neck and let us breathe. And I think that this is it feels like that. Let's give people the tools, the resources, and let them achieve what we know that they can achieve. But when you don't have stable housing, when you don't know as a child where you're going to lay your head at night, when you don't have access to internet to do your online studies, when you don't have all of those things that we know come with the security of home ownership, when we don't allow that to happen, then we can't allow other things to happen, like successful outcomes in education, successful health outcomes, successful wealth generation, all of those things. So this is not only time to to free the community to do what we know that they're capable of, if given an opportunity to do that. It is time for us to make amends for the damage that we've done.
Brenda, go ahead.
Chris, first of all, I'm an outsider. I don't live in Minneapolis. I live in the mountains of Santa Fe, New Mexico. But Al and I are a 70-year friendship.
Is that, Brenda, are you offering an invitation for me to come visit? Is that what?
No, I just want to thank you, because Al and I have been interviewing people every day, 5 days a week. And you're the first white man that I have heard to tell the truth. And I want to thank you, because I've heard this over and over. And Al's kind of a skeptic at times. We listen to the mayor, and we listen to the new commissioner. And my boss was sitting back saying, I've heard this before. The surplus is still there, and it hasn't budged. And what you're saying is so candid and so open about what has been done, not just in Minneapolis, but across. I was just totally livid 2 days ago when I woke up and I saw Lindsey Graham saying, if we don't do such and such, we're going to have chaos in the streets. And I'm saying, when does it stop? And you just gave a recipe. We have to stop redlining. We have to, I was about to say, Chris, do you know why all of this is happening? Do you, as a white man, understand the fear that we don't understand? Because a lot of my former students tell me, well, B. Gray, why can't we all sit at the same table? Why can't we all have a common goal? What is the fear about a Black man living next door to you? What is it? I don't get it. And you just came out and you said, this is it.
Well, let's let Chris say it again. Chris, respond if you would.
Well,
thank you, Brenda.
Well, and first of all, Brenda, in Al's defense, he's a journalist, so he's supposed to be skeptical. So we'll let him have that.
Well, but you have to understand where we came up, Chris. We came up in an area called Santa Fe Place, and it was a segregated Black area. And it was the first time Blacks, my parents, Al and I grew up on 28th Street in Kansas City. We were 5 years old. And, our parents bought homes. My parents' home was $7,000. But they still fought us when we came into the neighborhood. They burned down our school. Al gets mad all the time because we had to walk. But the school that we were supposed to go to during white flight, they burned it down.
Well,
but it's just, I heard you and I just kept saying, how many more can understand what, we interviewed Gary Hines yesterday with The Sounds of Blackness. And in his music, he talks about, the transatlantic, and he talks about Fanny Hammer, and I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, he's so powerful. I'm getting ready to write his article now. And it's like, when does it stop? And I try to explain to my former students, I taught International Baccalaureate, and that's a pretty tough subject.
Right.
And I always had to defend, but I couldn't give them an explanation when they asked me.
Let Chris back in. Chris,
well,
go ahead.
Brenda, one of the things that comes to my mind. So last year we remember the 100th anniversary of the destruction of Black Wall Street. And for a period of time, there was some conversation about what that meant and what that really did to the community that was destroyed and how intentional that was. And my favorite line in that, of all of the coverage of that, was the reporter for ABC News, whose great grandfather had owned the hotel in Black Wall Street that was destroyed, said, if my grandfather had been able to hold on to that hotel, I wouldn't be a reporter, I'd be an heiress.
Yeah.
Because the wealth that was stripped, and it happened not, maybe not as dramatically as it did on Black Wall Street, but in community after community after community, and whether that was building a freeway or, gentrification or whatever that would be. And so we can't, to your earlier question, we can't solve a problem unless we're honest about how we got here in the first place.
How do we get honest, Chris?
Yeah, well,
how does the truth come out in St. Paul? All of the interviews we've had, the GOP has stopped everything. Nothing in the legislative was passed.
If you try to tell the story in Florida nowadays, about Black Wall Street, they would say, "Oh, you can't tell that story." So they're not even going to allow. They're trying to prevent those stories from being told, because if they're told, then people have to confront the truth of what happened and what this country has been founded on. The original sin of what we did to indigenous people, what we did to enslaved Africans, what we have continued to do to people of color across the centuries in this country. Until we honestly confront it and put resources into it. This is why our special purpose credit program that we're developing at Habitat is an honest recognition of saying, what, this problem. So let's say that we do get to that truth-telling moment, and as wonderful as that would be, you still got to have some resources to undo the damage. And that's what we're trying to do. So if we can get 17 families into Harrison that have an opportunity to build wealth that hadn't had that before,
That's a big step.
it's a step. And it needs to be replicated. We're only one organization. We are very proud of the work that we're doing and the number of families that we serve. But we have a great partnership with Bremer Bank. They've stepped up into really put resources in it. But Bremer can't do it. Habitat alone can't do it. It needs to be every financial institution. It needs to be all of the realtors who understand how to work with families to get them, and somebody said, well, we get it's not a fast no to home ownership. Sometimes it's a slow yes. And you got to walk through this process. And if you got to do a credit repair, you got to do, develop resources for down payments or any of those things. But it starts, I think, Mary, you said it very well. It starts with understanding homeownership is not only a very good goal to achieve, to seek, but it is possible to achieve it. But sometimes it's a process, and we can help folks in that understanding.
Let me ask Mary and Larry to join in again. And you said you've been in the business almost 20 something years.
Yeah.
You probably walked through the last bubble, because there was an energetic time, maybe 20 years, 15 years ago, when everybody was on board to buying, and then the rates flipped and people started losing their houses. It was a big wrenching, almost one more wrenching of extraction of Black wealth.
Yeah.
What happened in that crisis? Can you describe what happened from the point of view of a person who was in the business of selling and getting our people into equity situations?
Well, one of the things that I really seen, like I said, being born and raised in North Minneapolis, we own our own home. My family were homeowners back in the 50s. And so I had friends that after the civil rights movement in the 60s, when a lot of the Jewish and white people moved out of North Minneapolis and became predominantly Black, then a lot of my friends and their families, they owned their own homes. Now when that 2003, 2004, right in that time, that's when all of a sudden all these new loans came in, these adjustable rate mortgages. Mm-hmm. And many of these people of color have been in those houses for years, and they came in and sold them these loans that were adjustable rate mortgage loans, which meant, they could pull money out of their house. And then they would give them a loan that would start out as something that they can handle. Well, adjustable rate of ARM starts low, but then over time it increases. And what happened is many of them, pulled money out of the house and took an ARM, adjustable rate mortgage loan. And in 3 to 5 years, when that loan payment jumped by $500, $600, $700, many of the people were older, they were unfixed income, so they couldn't keep up with the payment. I've seen so many homes, so many of my friends and family, I see a family that live in Minneapolis, lose homes, in the early to mid 2000s because they were sold bad loans and they knew the loans were bad. People in real estate, we all knew that this was not going to last. We all knew that these were bad loans. We used to try to counsel many of our, buyers and people, tell them, you don't want to do that. But, they didn't, many people in North Minneapolis didn't understand what an ARM was. And they didn't even explain it to them. They took them to the closing table. They gave them this big stack of 30, 40, 50,000. And they were thinking that they had this money and they could do things with it. And they go right back to the way they were. But 3 to 5 years later, that house note jumped and they couldn't afford it. And they lost their home. It was sad, sad, sad. And now the bad thing about it is there's so many investors in North Minneapolis owning these homes, And I just think North Minneapolis have some of the most beautiful homes in this state. The crown molding, the hand carved, the handrails, they're beautiful. And they have just turned North Minneapolis into homes to just, it's sad what they're doing to it. And I know many of my friends, it hurt them that their parents lost their investment. Those homes were supposed to go to them. and they lost those homes, being sold, bill of bad goods that wasn't good for the community. It wasn't good for the families. Everyone lost out. But one point I did want to go back and just say real quick about David. As David and I, we have the same heart. I started doing real estate.
David McGee at Build Wealth.
With Build Wealth. I feel like I've been doing real estate all my life. I started out helping my mother as a young kid, sometimes not helping, just going along with her cleaning houses. And I developed a love for houses then. And that was back in the early 50s and 60s. And then after that, I just would go to open houses. We would just drive around on Sunday. Back then, you get the newspaper, and you would go in open houses just to see them. And my dream always was, to my friends, put my girlfriends and my friends in homes, because I believe that there's nothing like home. That's where your peace is. That's where your joy is. That's where you relax. I mean, if you can't be comfortable and at peace in your home, where on this earth will you find that except home? And so I loved houses since I was a kid. I learned how to clean them with my mother. I went to open houses on a Sunday as a hobby. When I met my husband, we did for years. And then my friends and my family would be like, well, Mary, I'm going to buy a house. Would you go with me? And I'd say, sure. And then years later, I think it was a calling in my life that's what I do. So I walked into it. But I wanted to say with David has been in loans and this business for many, many years. And he has a heart for the people. I have a heart for the people. I love family. I love that lifestyle. And I want to see our families. I want to see people get homes so they can have pride and ownership and can really achieve what is still the American dream, to own a home. And people still want to own a home. And David, that's what he's all about. He puts a lot of heart, time, and sweat into trying to accomplish his goal. And I'm right there with him. That's what we want to do. We want to put our people in homes so they can truly experience that American dream. And I want them not only to own homes, but I want them to know that they can pay them off. You can pay your house off. People don't think, they get these 30-year loans and they think, well, I'm never going to pay it off, but you can pay these loans off. And people who walk into these homes at 25 or 30 years old, they got plenty of time to pay these homes off or pull money out, I think, as Chris had said, and then take it where you can reinvest it, and purchase investment property if you so desire. There's so much that you can do in home ownership.
Larry, let me ask you, don't want to ignore you there, brother. Are you from Minneapolis, St. Paul? Where are you from?
Actually, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, Al.
Wow.
Okay.
And so I have a background of equity building in Detroit. Detroit didn't have the problems. Well, we had the problems, but many of the folks who happened to be Black in Detroit, Michigan, were about wealth building. They understood those things and they stuck together. This was some time ago now. I'm a little younger than all of you. I'm 78, so I've got a big background.
Oh, we're young, Al.
Yes, right. You're younger than I am.
No, Alan. Yeah, Al and I are 75.
75. I heard. But from Detroit, I learned from my father, who was a janitor, owned his own home, and taught his kids what to do, along with my mother. And fortunately, I found out by some of the things that I've learned as a Christian brother that, it's important for the family structure to be strong. My father was a worker. He was a janitor, but he worked 3 or 4 jobs. My mother stayed at home and took care of the kids. Well, that's the old family structure. And it was a great deal of solace in that. And it was a wonderful springboard for us being educated to want to grab those with us and pull them along. I went
and
to
respect, Larry,
got an
respect
MBA
for them.
Yes, I got an MBA in business, and I wanted to learn how to do it. And after living 30 years in corporate America, and I saw how that was done, as Chris has talked about, and Chad, there's a way to go at building wealth. And I got trained on that. And now for my wife and I, this is a ministry. You know, as Christian brother and sister, we want to provide anything that we can do to help our people grow and build wealth in this country.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That's awesome. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So glad to hear it. And so, we got about 8 or 9 minutes left. I want to do two things. One is Mary and Larry, I want you to invite people to, your phone number, your website, to become homeowners with your help. That's number one. So take this time to market and to, promote your brand. And the same with Harrison and that project. Chad, how do people get in consideration for becoming a homeowner in the Harrison neighborhood in the Harrison Townhomes project? Chad, you first, and then we'll come back to Larry and to Mary.
Sure, you bet. So
And
most straightforward.
Chad,
Yeah.
feel free to take this conversation anywhere you want it to go.
Okay.
You want to respond to Mary and Larry, or to Chris, or to Brenda? Just this is a open architecture
Sure.
experience here.
Yeah, well, maybe just a couple of comments, and maybe echoing what you talked about, Al, on Monday. I did watch parts of the show, and you spoke eloquently about yourself buying a house about 50 years ago now, and the stability and economic advantage that provided. I am a product of affordable housing. I grew up in one of the first houses that PPL rehabbed at 31st in Columbus in South. And then I actually, I attended North High. So I do have some long-term familiarity with the North Side. But, I'm witness to that house that my parents probably wouldn't have been able to buy otherwise without the subsidy that PPL provided. Facilitating my going to a really good school. My brothers all went to really good schools that were in part paid for by that house. And then my parents were able to co-sign our loans, and even, they even bought a house for my brother when he returned from overseas because of the equity they had in their own house. So there's just so many aspects of my life that have been impacted by my parents, who were, lower income, although white. I don't mean to equate my experience with any person of color. But just in terms of what a house can do, it means a world of difference. And then I think Mary mentioned it, but the number of investors that are buying up houses, single family houses that were owned, throughout most of their life and are now renting them out, that's just a serious risk. And it's antithetical to kind of the bedrock American economic principle that home ownership is how you create wealth. And that is the opportunity for that is being dramatically limited by the number of houses that are being bought and converted to rental. And I think that's a public policy problem that isn't being addressed or even spoken about enough. Like, we need a massive political and policy change to limit the number of houses that are being used as rentals, because there are no houses to buy now, even if, notwithstanding all the challenges with buying a house, especially as a person of color and especially as a Black person, there's no houses. So I would just elevate that conversation and identify that as a huge risk to economic security for all of us. As far as the Harrison Townhomes, where we're trying to combat that, best path forward is to go to our website, which is www.tchabitat, as in Twin Cities Habitat.org / Harrison. And that'll get you to our landing page for the Harrison Townhomes project. It provides some more information about the project, and then has the links to enter into our home purchasing program. And so there's an eligibility questionnaire and other information about the program and the mortgage product that we offer. So that's just the easiest place to go right now. And there it is.
Nice.
We are, as I mentioned, we're hoping to get in the ground in October. So the first houses won't be available for purchase for another year. So that's a long wait, but it also, if a person has got some financial challenges that they need to deal with, whether it's credit score or debt to income ratios or whatever, there's time to enter the program now, get with our coaches and work on those challenges to be in a position to be able to apply for and hopefully purchase one of these units when they are ready for purchase.
Larry and Mary, if somebody wants to buy a house today, how do they reach you? And what can you do to help them make that decision in their journey towards equity and generational wealth?
Well, they can always give us a call. You can send us an email at marlesrealty.com. It's Larry Spears at marlesrealty.com and Mary Spears at marlesrealty.com. And one of our daughters has already stepped to the table, and she is a part of the organization, Kyra Spears at marlesrealty.com.
Congratulations.
We got a granddaughter and another daughter that's working hard to become a realtor. And I have a son who was a realtor, had some medical challenges, and is trying to get back on the game. So we're here. My wife's telephone number, 763. What's our? We'll use the cell. 612-508-6257, and I'm 612-875-7319. Helping folks get into homes is a ministry that we have. We have a great deal of feel about how we want to provide the springboard to the building of wealth for families and to get them all in a home for their peace and longevity.
Awesome. Listen, I've got about 3 minutes left. I want to close the program with you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chris Coleman. Again, thank you so much for being here. Former Mayor of St. Paul. Again, kudos to you for what you've said today, for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Habitat for Humanity, and for the excellent hosting of HUD Secretary Marcia L. Fudge here yesterday. So I'm going to give you the last 2 minutes, Chris, to sort of remind people what we can do, what we are doing, what we should be doing, and what the vision is for being the best human beings we can be where we are right now. Chris?
Well, a couple of things, Alan. First of all, thank you, and Brenda, thank you for your great program and really engaging the community in such wonderful conversations. The secretary and I talked a little bit. She's a former mayor. I'm a former mayor. The fact of the matter is, mayors understand that if they want strong, vibrant, and equitable communities, it starts with housing and decent, safe, affordable places for people to live and own. So that is a critical piece for all of us as we're thinking about what the future of the Twin Cities looks like. Is it going to be the equitable community we believe it to be? And if it's going to be that, then we have to make sure that people have the opportunity to buy homes, as I did when I was a young man, and as my parents had that opportunity. But I do want to mention that we do have a great network of realtors that are working, that have an understanding of how the Habitat mortgage product works. You don't have to buy a house that Habitat built. You can go out into the open market, work with your real estate agent, come and apply for a Habitat loan, and we make sure that house is affordable to the families that are buying them, and they pay no more than 30% of their household income for that mortgage. So we want to work with families. It gives them an opportunity to buy across the Twin Cities, not just in St. Paul or Minneapolis, but really through every neighborhood across the Twin Cities. So please go to the website, tchabitat.org. Begin that journey towards home ownership. Work with a real estate agent. And we can provide assistance to close the gap between what a family can afford and what that house costs. When we do that, Al, I really believe that we will create a much stronger and more vibrant community. Our kids are going to thrive. Our neighborhoods are going to thrive, and we're going to have the Twin Cities that we all want this to be. So just thanks for allowing us to tell our story.
Thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We're here every day, 1 o'clock. We want you to be part of this as well. Remember, today, send me an email, Al at Insight News, and claim a pair of tickets to the Minnesota State Fair. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks to all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.